The smell of freshly baked bread filled the cozy warmth of the bakery, a comforting constant in my otherwise predictable life. But the man who stepped through the door shattered that calm the moment he walked in. He was tall, his dark coat dusted with snow, and his sharp green eyes swept over the room before landing on me. For a moment, I thought he might have wandered in by mistake. Didn't he look like the type to linger over pastries? "You read, Jenna," he said, his voice quiet but certain. "Yes," I answered slowly, wiping flour from my hands. "Can I help you?" His gaze flicked to the window as if checking for something outside before he stepped closer. "You re the keeper of this place," he said. "The what?" He exhaled, his expression hardening. "This bakery isn't just a bakery. It is protected by a seal and old magic your family has been tied to for generations. And right now, that seal is weakening." I stared at him, the words too strange to process. "I think you've got the wrong person," a deep growl interrupted me, low and menacing, vibrating through the walls. My heart stopped as his jaw tightened. "No time to explain," he said, his voice sharp now. "They coming. You need to decide, fight or let them take everything." The windows rattled as another growl sounded, closer this time. My mind screamed to run, but something in his steady gaze told me I wasn't just part of this, I was at the center of it. Chapter 1, Moonlit Beginnings. Jenna loved the rhythmic predictability of her life. Every day began with the scent of rising dough, the comforting hum of the ovens, and the promise of transforming raw ingredients into something magical. Her bakery, the Crescent crust, sat at the heart of their charming Massachusetts town, a hub for laughter, gossip, and the occasional heartfelt confession over steaming cups of coffee and her famous moon-shaped cookies. Tonight, however, was anything but predictable. The power outage had hit without warning, plunging the entire street into darkness. The warm glow of string lights that usually adorned the bakery's windows had been snuffed out, leaving the interior lit only by the silvery moonlight streaming through the glass panes. Jenna had sent her staff home early, insisting she could handle the rest. Most of the patrons had left too, but one lingered. Max. He was a newcomer to town, first showing up at the bakery 3 weeks ago. With his sharp jawline, piercing gray eyes, and that easy, disarming grin, he quickly became a favorite among the regulars. Jenna, however, had been slow to warm to him. There was something about the way he carried himself, graceful yet commanding, that felt otherworldly. Now, as he stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up and a towel slung over his shoulder, Jenna couldn't help but notice how comfortable he seemed in the dim light, like he belonged to the night. "Are you sure you want to stay and help?" she asked, brushing a stray curl from her face as she stacked trays. Max smirked. "You're short-handed and I've got nothing better to do. Besides, who could say no to the queen of cookies?" Jenna rolled her eyes, hiding a small smile. "Flattery will get you nowhere, but thanks." The mop-s in the back. As Max disappeared into the kitchen, Jenna allowed herself a moment of reprieve. The power outage was inconvenient, but it gave the bakery a strangely enchanting atmosphere. The moonlight painted silvery streaks across the countertops, illuminating a tray of her moon-shaped cookies, the ones that had earned her a devoted following. She was pulling down a lantern from the top shelf when a crash sounded from the kitchen. Heart racing, she rushed toward the noise. "Max, are you okay?" She found him crouched over a shattered jar of flour, his hand pressed against his palm. Blood dripped onto the tiles, startlingly bright against the dark floor. "Damn it," he muttered, but when he looked up, his expression softened. "Sorry about the mess." Jenna knelt beside him, reaching for a clean towel. "Let me see." "It's nothing," he said quickly, but Jenna had already caught sight of the cut, or rather, what should have been a cut. The wound was there, deep and jagged, but as she watched, the edges knit together as if stitched by invisible threads. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving only a faint trace of blood. Jenna froze, the towel limp in her hands. What just before she could finish, Max inhaled sharply, his shoulders stiffening. A low, guttural growl escaped his throat, a sound that sent a chill down her spine. His eyes flashed, the gray brightening to an almost luminescent silver. Max, she whispered, backing away slightly. He blinked, and just like that, the strange intensity was gone. His features softened, and he ran a hand through his hair, avoiding her gaze. "I should go," he said, his voice tight. "No," Jenna said firmly, though her heart was pounding. "You're not leaving until you tell me what just happened." Max hesitated, the tension in his posture warring with the vulnerability in his eyes. "It's not what you think." "Really?" She folded her arms, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Because it looked a lot like you just healed a deep cut in 3 seconds flat and—" Growled. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I did warn you I wasn't like most people. That's not an explanation." Max met her gaze then, his expression unreadable. "You rewrite. It's not." He glanced at the door. "But I can explain it here." Jenna's throat tightened. She had always considered herself a practical person, grounded in reality. But reality didn't explain what she'd just seen or the eerie magnetism Max seemed to exude. "Tomorrow," he said softly, his tone almost pleading. "If you really want answers, meet me at the clearing behind Harper Woods." Midnight. Jenna hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to lock the door behind him and forget the entire bizarre encounter. But curiosity tinged with something deeper kept her silent. Finally, she nodded. Midnight. Max's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Good night, Jenna." He stepped into the shadows, disappearing into the moonlit night. Jenna remained on the floor, the towel still in her hand, staring at the spot where he stood. The power returned moments later, but the sense of normalcy Jenna craved didn't. Something had shifted, something she couldn't yet name. And she wasn't sure her life would ever be the same again. Chapter 2, A Cut Too Deep. Jenna spent the next day in a fog of distraction. Every clink of a tray or hiss of the espresso machine felt distant, as if her body were moving on autopilot, while her mind stayed, trapped in the strange memory of Max's rapidly healing hand and the low, animalistic growl that had rumbled from his chest. She told herself 100 times to forget it, to chalk it up to exhaustion or some strange trick of the light. But every time she looked at the clock, a gnawing sense of anticipation stirred in her chest. Midnight couldn't come fast enough. The bakery bustled with its usual energy, the comforting chatter of customers filling the air. Jenna tried to lose herself in the rhythm of her work, but her hands trembled as she piped icing onto the last batch of moon cookies for the day. "Are you feeling okay, Jenna?" asked Marie, her part-time assistant, as she tied the strings on a to-go box. Jenna blinked, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired. That power outage threw me off last night." Marie nodded sympathetically. "Well, didn't he overdo it? Want me to close up tonight?" "No, it's fine," Jenna said quickly. Too quickly. Marie gave her a curious look, but didn't press further. As the evening wore on, the bakery emptied, leaving Jenna alone to tidy up. She took her time, delaying her departure even as the hours ticked closer to midnight. The moon hung high in the sky, bathing the street in a soft glow when she finally locked up and headed toward Harper Woods. The woods felt alive with whispers and movement as Jenna followed the dirt path, her breath puffing in the chilly night air. She tightened her scarf around her neck, her heart pounding louder with each step. "Why am I doing this?" she muttered to herself. But no matter how much her rational mind screamed at her to turn back, her feet carried her forward. The clearing came into view, a wide circle of open space surrounded by towering trees. The moonlight bathed the area in a silver sheen, giving the place an almost ethereal quality. Max was already there, leaning against a tree with his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked different under the moonlight, his features sharper, his presence more commanding. "You came," he said, his voice low and smooth. Jenna crossed her arms, trying to mask her nerves. "You gave me more questions than answers last night. I didn't really have a choice." Max pushed off the tree, his movements fluid and almost predatory. He stopped a few feet away from her, his gaze searching hers. "I owe you an explanation, but first I need you to promise me something." Jenner raised an eyebrow. I am not big on blind promises. This isn't blind, Max said softly. It's for your safety. If I tell you the truth, you can talk about it to anyone. Not your friends, not your family. No one. His intensity sent a shiver down her spine. She hesitated but eventually nodded. Fine, I promise. Max exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. The thing you saw last night, the quick healing, the growl at us because I am not human. Not entirely. Jenna stared at him, her mind racing. Not human. What does that mean, are you? Like some kind of alien? A faint smile tugged at his lips. Not an alien. He glanced up at the moon, his expression unreadable. I am a werewolf. Jenna blinked, waiting for him to laugh or say he was joking. But he didn't. His gaze remained steady, and there was no trace of humor in his tone. A werewolf, she repeated, the word feeling strange on her tongue. Max nodded. I know it's hard to believe, no kidding. She shook her head, pacing a small circle. This is insane. Werewolves aren't real. They myths, folklore, something you tell kids to scare them into staying inside at night. Most myths are rooted in some truth, Max said calmly. I didn't expect you to believe me right away. But what you saw last night, that wasn't normal. You know that. Jenna stopped pacing, meeting his gaze. She thought about the wound sealing itself shut, the feral sound that had slipped from his throat, and the unshakable feeling that Max was different. You serious, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I am. She swallowed hard. Prove it. Max hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his jacket and pulled off his shirt. In the moonlight, his skin glowed faintly, and Jenna couldn't help but notice the faint scars crisscrossing his chest and arms. What are you? Before she could finish, Max closed his eyes. His breathing deepened, his muscles tensed, and his body began to shift. It was subtle at first, the elongation of his fingers, the way his nails darkened into sharp claws. Then came the more dramatic changes. His shoulders broadened, his features sharpened, and his teeth lengthened into fangs. His eyes glowed a brilliant silver, almost like molten metal, and a low growl rumbled from deep within his chest. Jenna stumbled back, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Oh my God. Max stilled, his transformed gaze locking onto hers. This is what I am, Jenna. What I've always been. Her mind raced with questions, but fear and awe rendered her speechless. Max took a cautious step toward her, his movements deliberate. I would never hurt you, he said, his voice rough but still unmistakably his. Jenna's hands trembled as she took a shaky breath. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth, he said. And because, he hesitated, his glowing eyes softening. I trust you. The weight of his words settled over her, leaving Jenna torn between fear and an inexplicable pull toward the man, no, the creature standing before her. Max, she whispered, her voice cracking. What happens now? He shifted back, the transformation reversing until he was fully human again. His chest rose and fell as he pulled his shirt back on. Now, he said quietly, you decide if you want to be a part of this. My world is dangerous, Jenna. I wouldn't blame you if you walked away. Jenna stared at him, her mind a storm of emotions. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat into the safety of her ordinary life. But another part, stronger and more curious, was already stepping closer. I didn't know if I can walk away, she admitted. Max's expression softened, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Then I'll do everything I can to protect you. The wind rustled through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of something new. As Jenna stood beneath the moonlight, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same. Chapter 3. Whispers in the dark. The days that followed were marked by a tension Jenna couldn't shake, like the static charge before a storm. Her bakery, usually her sanctuary, now felt like a stage where every customer's gaze lingered a second too long, their conversations edged with something unsaid. Word of Max's frequent visits had spread quickly through the tight-knit town. In a place like this, strangers stood out, especially one as striking and enigmatic as Max. Jenna tried to brush off the gossip, but it was hard to ignore the knowing smiles and curious glances. "Trouble in paradise?" teased Marie one afternoon as Jenna boxed up an order. "What are you talking about?" Jenna asked, forcing a casual tone. Marie smirked, leaning on the counter. "Oh, come on. Everyone else noticed how often Max drops by. The mysterious out-of-towner hanging around our very own cookie queen. People are curious." "Well, people need a new hobby," Jenna muttered, tightening the ribbon on the box. Marie laughed. "You can blame them, yes, you know." She waved her hand vaguely. "Tall and handsome," Jenna supplied dryly. "Brooding," Marie said with a grin, like he's carrying some deep, dark secret. "If only you knew," Jenna thought, her stomach twisting. Her nights were no better. The shadows in her apartment seemed darker, the creaks of the old building louder. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of silver eyes and clawed hands reaching for her. And then there was the journal. Jenna found it 2 days after Max's revelation, buried beneath a stack of forgotten cookbooks in the storage room of the bakery. The cover was cracked leather, the pages yellowed with age, and the faint scent of vanilla and cinnamon clung to it, a remnant of its long tenure in the bakery. The name Eleanor Silver was scrawled inside the front cover. Jenna's grandmother. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. What she initially mistook for recipes turned out to be something far stranger. Scattered among instructions for breads and pastries were symbols, strange diagrams, and notes written in a mixture of English and Latin. "The moon's pull is strongest in the dark of winter. Beware the blood moon, its power can unmake what has been bound. The crescent crust must remain a sanctuary." Sanctuary? Jenna frowned, her heart racing as she skimmed further. The entries were cryptic, some written with an urgency that made the letters jagged and uneven. "They come with the frost. Protect the hearth. The family's bond to the moon cannot be broken." What is this? Jenna whispered, the book heavy in her hands. The last few pages were blank, except for a single word written boldly across the final sheet, "Beware." Jenna stared at the word, unease prickling her skin. She had never known her grandmother well. Eleanor had passed when Jenna was young, but her mother had often described her as eccentric. Was this what she meant? A secret journal filled with warnings about the moon and sanctuaries. Her first instinct was to call Max. If anyone could make sense of this, it was him. But as she stared at her phone, a new thought crept in. Was she ready to trust him completely? He had revealed his secret, yes, but what if there was more he wasn't telling her? That evening, Jenna stayed late at the bakery, flipping through the journal between cleaning tasks. The stillness of the empty shop was a comfort, a reprieve from the questions swirling in her mind. But as the clock neared closing time, that stillness was broken. It began with a faint scrape, like a footstep brushing against gravel. Jenna froze, her ears straining. "Hello," she called, her voice echoing in the quiet. No answer. Shaking her head, she returned to the counter, chalking it up to her overactive imagination. But then she heard it again, closer this time. Her pulse quickened as she moved toward the front windows. The street outside was empty, bathed in the soft orange glow of the street lamps. Yet the uneasy feeling persisted, a prickling at the back of her neck. She locked the front door and pulled the blinds, hoping to shut out the eerie sensation. As she turned away, a faint tapping sounded from the back door. Jenna's heart leapt into her throat. She grabbed the nearest object, a rolling pin, and crept toward the back. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The tapping stopped. Swallowing hard, Jenna unlocked the door and flung it open, ready to swing the rolling pin if necessary. But there was no one there. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she scanned the alley, her eyes catching on a shadow that seemed out of place, a dark figure standing just at the edge of the light. "Jenna," a voice rasped, low and guttural. She stumbled back, dropping the rolling pin with a clatter. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure didn't move, its features hidden in the darkness. "Stay away from him," it growled. "He'll destroy you." A chill ran down Jenna's spine. "Who are you talking about?" But the figure didn't answer. It turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Jenna alone in the doorway, trembling. Later that night, Jenna sat in her apartment, clutching a steaming mug of tea as she tried to make sense of what had happened. The journal lay open on the coffee table, the word beware staring up at her like a warning she had ignored. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. She grabbed it eagerly, half hoping it was Max. "Can we meet?" his message read. She hesitated, her thoughts racing. The figure S warning echoed in her mind, but so did Max S words from the clearing, "I trust you." Jenna typed her response with trembling fingers. "Where?" The reply came almost instantly. "The bakery. Midnight." As the clock ticked toward the hour, Jenna felt the weight of the journal and the strange encounter pressing down on her. She didn't know what answers she would find, but one thing was certain: she couldn't turn back now. Chapter 4. The Wolf and the Baker. Midnight had always been Jenna's favorite hour, a time when the world seemed to pause and exhale, leaving the streets and sky untouched by the noise of the day. But tonight, the stillness carried a sharper edge, a sense of anticipation that made her heart race. She waited in the bakery, the dim light of a single lantern casting flickering shadows across the walls. The journal lay open on the counter beside her, its cryptic notes a maddening puzzle. Her gaze kept darting to the locked door, waiting for the sound of Max's knock. When it finally came, it startled her. Jenna unlocked the door and opened it to find Max standing there, his expression grave. He looked more rugged than usual, a faint shadow of stubble darkening his jawline, his leather jacket creaking softly as he stepped inside. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "I should be thanking you," Max replied, his eyes scanning the room. "You retaking a risk just by talking to me." Jenna frowned. "I think the risk goes both ways. Someone came to the bakery earlier tonight, someone who seemed to know about you." Max stiffened, his hands clenching into fists. "What did they say?" "They warned me to stay away from you, said you'd destroy me." His expression darkened, the glow of his silver eyes flickering beneath the surface. "Did you see their face?" "No, they stayed in the shadows, but their voice." She shivered. It didn't sound entirely human. Max cursed under his breath and paced the length of the bakery. "It's starting." "What's starting?" Jenna demanded. He stopped, his gaze piercing. "The moment I told you the truth, I put a target on your back. There are creatures who like the idea of a human knowing about us. Especially you." "Why especially me?" Max hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because you're not just any human, Jenna. Your family has ties to the supernatural world, whether you realize it or not." Jenna blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" He gestured to the open journal on the counter. "That book isn't just a collection of recipes. It's a guide. Your grandmother was what we call a keeper, someone entrusted with protecting the boundary between the human world and ours. Her bakery wasn't just a business, it was a sanctuary, a safe haven for creatures like me." Jenna stared at him, her heart racing. "That's impossible. My grandmother was just a baker. She made cookies and pies, not magic spells." "She made more than that," Max said, his voice steady. "Your moon cookies, for example, do you know why they were so popular? It's not just because they taste good. They carry traces of lunar energy, something only a keeper can imbue. It's subtle, but for creatures tied to the moon, it's irresistible." Jenna shook her head, the words spinning around her like a whirlwind. "No, this is crazy. I am not some magical keeper. I am just a baker trying to keep the lights on." Max stepped closer, his voice softening. "I know it's a lot to take in, but think about it. Have you ever felt drawn to the moon? Have you ever wondered why your cookies bring people together in ways you can explain?" Jenna opened her mouth to argue, but the truth lodged in her throat. She had always felt a strange comfort in the moonlight, an inexplicable pull that guided her creativity and calmed her fears. And her cookies. There was something special about them, something she'd never been able to pinpoint. Before she could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Jenna whirled around to see the front window of the bakery splintering inward, shards scattering across the floor. A figure leapt through the opening, landing with predatory grace. It wasn't human. The creature stood on two legs, its body covered in sleek black fur that gleamed in the dim light. Its eyes burned an unnatural yellow, and its claws gleamed as it snarled at them. "Get behind me," Max ordered, his voice sharp. Jenna didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed the journal and ducked behind the counter, her heart hammering as Max stepped forward, his body already beginning to change. His muscles rippled, his hands elongating into claws as his face contorted into something more wolf than man. He let out a guttural snarl, and the creature lunged. The clash was brutal and swift, the two figures colliding with enough force to rattle the shelves. Max was faster, his claws raking across the creature's side, but it fought back fiercely, snapping its jaws inches from his throat. Jenna peeked over the counter, her breath caught in her chest. She had never seen anything like this, a battle that was both savage and strangely fluid, as if the combatants were locked in a dance only they understood. "Jenna," Max's voice broke through her trance. "The salt use the salt." It took her a moment to realize what he meant. She scrambled to the nearest shelf and grabbed a jar of coarse salt, her hands shaking as she unscrewed the lid. "Throw it," Max shouted. With a burst of courage, Jenna hurled the salt at the creature. The grains hit its fur, and it let out a piercing screech, recoiling as wisps of smoke rose from its body. Max seized the moment, delivering a powerful blow that sent the creature crashing through the remains of the broken window. It let out a final, pained growl before disappearing into the night. For a moment, the bakery was silent except for the sound of Jenna's ragged breathing. Max turned to her, his eyes still glowing but filled with concern. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her hands were trembling. "What was that?" "A rogue," Max said grimly. "A wolf without a pack. They re dangerous, unpredictable, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." "What did it want?" He hesitated, his gaze flicking to the journal in her hands. "That book. You." Jenna's stomach dropped. "Why me?" Max stepped closer, his voice low. "Because you re a keeper, Jenna. Whether you believe it or not, your bloodline is tied to the moon, and that makes you powerful. They see you as a threat or an opportunity." Jenna's grip tightened on the journal as the weight of his words sank in. She wasn't just a baker anymore. She was part of a world she didn't understand, a world that was dangerous and relentless. But as she looked at Max, his protective stance and steady gaze grounding her, she realized one thing: she wasn't facing it alone. Chapter 5, Secrets in the Flower. Jenna spent the next morning in a haze of exhaustion. She barely slept after the attack, her mind churning with thoughts of rogue wolves, keepers, and Max's cryptic warnings. The bakery, usually a source of comfort, now felt fragile, as though its walls could barely hold back the chaos waiting to break through. She tried to immerse herself in her work, but even the familiar motions of kneading dough and measuring ingredients couldn't quiet the storm inside her. Every shadow seemed deeper, every creak louder. Marie's cheerful chatter as she prepped the coffee bar was a stark contrast to Jenna's heavy mood. "You're awfully quiet today," Marie said, glancing over her shoulder. "Everything okay?" Jenna forced a smile. "Just a long night. Didn't he get much sleep?" Marie frowned, but didn't press further. Jenna was grateful. As the morning rush tapered off, Jenna retreated to the storage room, the journal tucked under her arm. She locked the door behind her and sat cross-legged on the floor, spreading the book open across her lap. The faded pages felt heavier now, each word a thread connecting her to a world she hadn't known existed. She flipped back to the symbols scattered among the recipes, tracing her finger over one shaped like a crescent moon encircled by intricate lines. There were notes written in Alina's familiar looping handwriting. The crescent seal must remain intact. Flour, salt, sugar, and moonlight, the foundation of the keeper's power. Jenna frowned, her mind snagging on the word seal. What seal, and what did her cookies have to do with it? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She tensed, her heart pounding. "Jenna, you in there?" Max's voice. She let out a shaky breath and unlocked the door. He stepped inside, his expression as tired as hers. "You look worse than I feel," she said, managing a weak smile. "Rogues have that effect," Max replied, closing the door behind him. "I stayed up tracking the one from last night. It's gone for now." Jenna's stomach twisted. "For now? They didn't give up easily," he said, sitting on an overturned crate. His eyes flicked to the journal. "You've been reading." She nodded, showing him the pages she'd been studying. "I found this entry about a seal, something called the Crescent seal. Do you know what it means?" Max's brow furrowed. "The Crescent seal is a protective ward. It's what keeps the bakery and, by extension, you hidden from most supernatural threats. But seals weaken over time, especially if they are not maintained." Jenna blinked. "Wait, you're saying this bakery is protected by magic?" "It was," Max corrected. "If a rogue found you last night, it means the seal is failing." A wave of dread washed over her. "How do we fix it?" Max glanced at the journal, then back at her. "The seal is tied to your family. You're the only one who can restore it." Her stomach dropped. "I have no idea how to do that." Max reached out, his hand brushing hers. "You're stronger than you think. Your grandmother knew what she was doing when she made this place a sanctuary. And if she left you that journal, it means she believed you could do it too." Jenna hesitated, her mind swirling with doubts. But as she met Max's gaze, something in his steady confidence gave her strength. "What do I need to do?" she asked. Max smiled faintly. "First, we need to gather the ingredients. Everything in the seal's original recipe was symbolic: flour for strength, salt for purity, sugar for harmony, and moonlight for protection. If the journal is right, those ingredients are still the foundation." "Okay," Jenna said, nodding. "We've got flour, salt, and sugar. But moonlight? That's the tricky part," Max admitted. "It has to be gathered during a specific lunar phase, usually a full moon." Jenna glanced out the window at the cloudy sky. "When's the next full moon?" 3 nights from now," Max said. "Until then, we need to keep the bakery and you as safe as possible." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Jenna and Max worked late into the night, scouring the journal for clues and testing variations of her grandmother's recipes, hoping to decipher the exact method for restoring the seal. But even as they worked, the sense of unease grew. Max had warned her that rogues often worked in packs, and Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that the one from the other night wasn't the only one watching. It wasn't until the second night that she found it a nearly hidden entry in the journal, written in faint ink: "Beware the one who seeks the moon's shadow. They will come as a friend, but bring only ruin." The words sent a chill down her spine. She hadn't told anyone except Max about the journal, but what if someone else knew? When she brought it up to Max, his expression darkened. "The moon's shadow refers to a traitor, someone working against the keeper's protection. If someone like that is in town, it makes everything more dangerous." "Great," Jenna muttered, rubbing her temples. "As if I didn't have enough to worry about." Max's hand brushed her arm, grounding her. "We'll figure it out, but you need to stay alert. Trust your instincts." Jenna nodded, though her nerves were frayed. On the 3rd night, the full moon rose high in the sky, casting the town in a silvery glow. Jenna stood in the center of the bakery's kitchen, her heart racing as Max laid out the ingredients on the counter. "Are you ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," Jenna replied, gripping the journal like a lifeline. Max stepped back, letting her take the lead. Following the journal's instructions, she mixed the ingredients carefully, her hands steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. When the dough was ready, she placed it on a tray and carried it to the front window where the moonlight streamed in. "What now?" she asked, glancing at Max. "Now you let the moonlight do its work," he said. They waited in tense silence as the soft glow of the moon bathed the dough. Jenna felt a strange warmth radiating from the tray, as if the moon itself was breathing life into the mixture. After what felt like an eternity, the warmth faded, leaving the dough faintly glowing. Jenna turned to Max. "Did it work?" He closed his eyes, his brow furrowing in concentration. Then he smiled. "The seal's stronger. I can feel it." Relief flooded her, but it was short-lived. A low growl echoed from outside, followed by the sound of claws scraping against wood. Max's smile vanished. We were not done yet. The rogues had come. Chapter 6, the full moon rising, the growling grew louder, a guttural, bone-deep sound that reverberated through the bakery walls. Jenna's breath hitched as she exchanged a panicked glance with Max. "They re-here," she whispered. Max's body tensed, his every muscle coiled like a spring. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice low but firm. "No way." Jenna grabbed a heavy rolling pin from the counter. Her hands trembled, but she set her jaw. "This is my bakery. I am not hiding while they tear it apart." Max's lips twitched, almost forming a smile, but the moment passed as the door rattled violently. He stepped forward, his frame blocking the entrance as the wood splintered under the force of another blow. "They retesting the seal," he murmured, his eyes glowing faintly. "It's holding for now." Jenna's heart sank. For now. Before Max could answer, the door burst inward, shards of wood scattering across the floor. 3 figures loomed in the shattered doorway, their forms twisted and feral under the pale moonlight. They were larger than the rogue that attacked before, their hulking frames bristling with dark fur. Yellow eyes glinted like embers, locked on Jenna. "Get back!" Max snarled, his voice deeper, more animalistic. The lead rogue, a massive wolf with jagged scars running across its muzzle, let out a guttural laugh. "Look who's playing protector," it growled. Its voice was a harsh rasp, somewhere between human and beast. "You've fallen far, Max." Max's hands flexed, claws extending as his transformation began. "Last chance. Leave or you won't walk away from this." The scarred rogue bared its teeth in a gruesome grin. "You think we re afraid of you? You re nothing without a pack." With a roar, the rogue lunged. Max met it head-on, their bodies colliding with a bone-crunching impact. The other 2 rogues surged forward, their claws tearing through the air as they charged toward Jenna. She barely had time to react. Instinct kicked in as she swung the rolling pin, the heavy wood cracking against one rogue's arm. It howled in pain, but didn't stop, its claws raking toward her. "Jenna, down!" Max's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. She dropped to the floor just as Max tore the rogue away from her, throwing it across the room. It slammed into a display case, shattering glass and scattering cookies everywhere. The 3rd rogue snarled, closing in on Jenna. She scrambled backward, her hands finding the jar of coarse salt. Without thinking, she flung it, the grains spraying across the rogue's face. The creature screamed, smoke rising from its singed fur as it clawed at its eyes. Jenna scrambled to her feet, her chest heaving. "Max!" she shouted. He was locked in a brutal struggle with the scarred rogue, their movements a blur of claws and fangs. Blood streaked his arms, but he held his ground, his strength a match for the larger wolf. "Get the seal!" he roared, his voice breaking through the chaos. Jenna's heart raced. The seal, of course. The journal had mentioned one final step to activate its full power, but she hadn't understood it until now. She grabbed the tray of moonlit dough and raced to the center of the bakery, where a faint symbol was etched into the floor, an intricate crescent moon surrounded by looping lines. Placing the tray carefully on the symbol, Jenna closed her eyes and whispered the words she had read in the journal. "By the light of the moon, by the bond of blood, I call upon the Keeper's power. Protect this place. Protect all within." A pulse of energy surged through the air, making her hair stand on end. The symbol on the floor glowed, the crescent moon radiating a brilliant silver light that spread outward like a wave. The rogues froze, their snarls turning to whimpers as the light washed over them. The scarred rogue staggered back, its eyes wide with panic. "No," it howled, its voice twisted with fury. "This isn't over." With a final glare at Max, the rogue turned and fled, the others following close behind. The light chased them into the night, fading as they disappeared into the darkness. Silence fell over the bakery, broken only by the sound of Jenna's ragged breathing. She sank to her knees, her entire body trembling as adrenaline drained away. "Jenna." She looked up to see Max approaching, his body bloodied and bruised but still upright. His eyes had returned to their normal gray, filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, crouching beside her. "I think so," she said, her voice shaky. "What about you?" He gave a faint smile. "IV had worse." Jenna managed a weak laugh, but her mind was racing. What just happened? How did the seal work like that? "It responded to you," Max said. "Your connection to this place, to your family's legacy, it's stronger than you realize. You activated it in a way only a keeper can." She glanced at the glowing symbol on the floor, the faint light slowly fading. "It's gone." "No," Max said softly. "It's part of this place now, stronger than ever. As long as the seal holds, the bakery will be safe." Jenna nodded, relief washing over her. But as the reality of what had just happened sank in, another question surfaced. "Why did they call you Packless?" she asked, her voice tentative. Max's expression darkened, the light in his eyes dimming. "Because I am," he admitted. "I left my pack years ago. They didn't agree with the way I wanted to live." Jenna frowned. "The way you wanted to live? They wanted control, they wanted violence, I wanted something else." His gaze softened as he looked at her. Something better. Her cheeks warmed under his intense stare, but before she could respond, he stood and offered her a hand. "Come on," he said. "We need to clean up before Marie gets here and thinks the bakery was hit by a tornado." Jenna took his hand, his warmth grounding her. As they worked together to restore the bakery, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been irrevocably changed. But for the first time in days, she wasn't afraid. The seal was holding, and so was she. Chapter 7, the pack's warning. The next morning, the bakery was eerily quiet. Jenna had reopened as usual, determined to keep up appearances despite the chaos of the night before. Max had helped her clean up the worst of the damage, but the shattered display case and deep claw marks on the doorframe were hard to explain. "Raccoons," Jenna told Marie when she arrived, her tone carefully casual. "Big ones. They got in through the back." Marie arched an eyebrow, but didn't press further. "Guess it's time to get that reinforced door you've been talking about." "Guess so," Jenna replied, forcing a smile. But no amount of forced normalcy could erase the unease creeping into her thoughts. The rogues had been driven off, the seal was restored, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that last night was only the beginning. Max's words echoed in her mind. They won't give up easily. That afternoon, the bakery bell jingled, and Jenna looked up from the counter, expecting one of her regulars. Instead, her heart sank. 3 strangers stood in the doorway. They looked human enough, but there was something about them, something sharp and predatory, that set her on edge. Their leader, a tall man with sandy blonde hair and an air of authority, stepped forward. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Jenna, and a smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Jenna," he said, his voice smooth and friendly but with an undertone that made her skin crawl. She swallowed, gripping the counter tighter. "Who's asking?" The man tilted his head, his smile widening. "I am Lucas. This is Tasha and Caleb." He gestured to the 2 figures behind him, a woman with jet black hair and a wiry man with a permanent scowl. "We're here to talk about Max." Jenna's blood ran cold. "What about him?" Lucas took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "We're from his pack." Or rather, the pack he abandoned. Her heart pounded. "He said he didn't have a pack." Lucas chuckled. "Of course he did. It's easier to lie than to explain why he left us high and dry. But you should know the truth, Jenna." "What truth?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "That Max isn't who you think he is," Lucas said, leaning against the counter. "He's dangerous, unstable. The rogues you saw last night, they redrawn to him because he's one of them." "That's not true," Jenna snapped, her temper flaring. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "And you know this because he told you." "Let me guess, he said he's a lone wolf, that he left the pack for noble reasons." "Am I close?" Jenna's silence was answer enough. Lucas's smile faded, his expression turning serious. "You replaying with fire, Jenna. Max isn't your savior. He's a liability. And if you keep siding with him, you'll burn with him. The words struck a nerve, but Jenna refused to show it. She straightened, meeting Lucas's gaze head-on. If you redone spreading lies, I think you should leave. Lucas studied her for a long moment, then sighed dramatically. Suit yourself. But don't say we didn't warn you. He turned to leave, but paused in the doorway, glancing over his shoulder. Oh, and Jenna, next time Max comes around, tell him we rewatching. With that, Lucas and his companions disappeared into the street, leaving Jenna shaken. Max arrived that evening, his expression immediately darkening when he saw the tension in her face. What happened? He asked, his voice low and urgent. Your old pack was here, Jenna said, her words clipped. Lucas, Tasha, and Caleb. They wanted to talk about you. Max's jaw tightened. What did they say? They called you dangerous, said the rogues are drawn to you because you re one of them. He froze, his eyes darkening. You don't believe them, do you? Jenna hesitated, the memory of Lucas's warning still fresh. I don't know what to believe, she admitted. But I want the truth, Max. Why did you really leave your pack? Max ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. It's not as simple as they make it sound. My pack, they were ruthless. They believed in dominance and control, in using their strength to rule over others. I couldn't be a part of that, so I left. Then why do they think you re dangerous? Because I know their secrets, he said bitterly. I know what they've done, what they re capable of. And Lucas, he can stand the idea of someone defying him and getting away with it. Jenna studied him, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty. What she saw instead was raw vulnerability, a man carrying the weight of a fractured past. I believe you, she said softly. Max exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. Thank you. But what do we do now? She asked. They not going to leave us alone, are they? No, Max admitted. Lucas doesn't let go of grudges. And now that the seal's restored, he'll see it as a challenge. Jenna's stomach twisted. Then we'll have to be ready. Max nodded, his expression grim. They not just coming after me, Jenna. They'll come after you too. I am not scared of them, Jenna said, though her heart was pounding. Max stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. You should be, but I'll protect you, no matter what. For a moment they stood in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. Jenna felt the weight of the danger surrounding them, but also the strange comfort of Max's presence. Whatever came next, she knew they would face it together. And as the moon rose outside, casting its silver light over the bakery, Jenna braced herself for the battles yet to come. Chapter 8, an ancient bond. The next few days passed in a haze of tension. The bakery remained open, but Jenna noticed fewer customers lingering. Rumors about the strange sounds and the broken window had begun circulating through town, and Jenna could feel the weight of the whispers. Max stayed close, keeping watch from the shadows. He never strayed far from the bakery, his sharp senses attuned to every sound and movement. Jenna appreciated his presence, even if it made her more aware of the danger looming over them. But something else gnawed at her. Lucas's warning about the rogues and the lingering questions about her family's connection to the seal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the last customer left, Jenna pulled the journal from its hiding spot under the counter. I've been reading through this, she said, holding it up as Max entered. And I think I missed something important. Max raised an eyebrow. What did you find? She flipped to a page near the middle, pointing to an entry that had caught her attention. The Keeper's bond to the moon is rooted in blood, bound by the Crescent crust. The seal must be renewed with each generation to preserve its strength. Failure will invite chaos. Blood? Max asked, frowning. Jenna nodded. I think that's why the seal was failing. My grandmother must have maintained it, but when she passed, no one took over. My mom didn't believe in any of this, so it was never renewed. Max leaned closer, studying the text. That makes sense. If the seal is tied to your family, it would need someone in the bloodline to sustain it. But how? Jenna asked, frustration creeping into her voice. The journal talks about blood and the moon, but it doesn't explain what I am supposed to do. Max thought for a moment, then stood. There might be another way to find out. Come with me. Jenna blinked. Where? To someone who might have answers, Max said, grabbing his jacket. The drive was quiet, the tension between them palpable as Max guided the car toward the outskirts of town. Jenna's curiosity warred with her apprehension. Who are we going to see? She finally asked. A seer, Max said. She's complicated, but she knows more about the old ways than anyone I've ever met. Jenna frowned. You trust her? Max hesitated. Not exactly. But she's helped me before, and she might be able to help you. The road turned from pavement to gravel, winding through dense woods until they reached a small, weathered cabin surrounded by wildflowers and herbs. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the faint scent of sage lingered in the air. Max knocked on the door, the sound echoing through the quiet night. Moments later, it creaked open, revealing a tall, wiry woman with sharp green eyes and streaks of silver in her dark hair. Well, she said, her lips curling into a smirk. If it isn't Max the lone wolf, and you've brought company. This is Jenna, Max said, his tone guarded. She needs your help. The woman's eyes flicked to Jenna, her gaze piercing. A keeper, are you? You've got a leaner's eyes. Jenna stiffened. You knew my grandmother, knew her. The woman laughed. I taught her everything she knew. Come in, child. We have much to discuss. The cabin's interior was cluttered but cozy, filled with books, jars of herbs, and flickering candles. The woman who introduced herself as Sybil motioned for them to sit at a worn wooden table. So Sybil began, pouring tea into mismatched mugs. You re the new keeper. Eleanor always said her granddaughter would inherit the gift, but I wasn't sure you'd live long enough to use it. Jenna blinked. Excuse me, rogues, child. They've been sniffing around for years, waiting for the seal to weaken. It's a miracle you survived this long without training. Training? Jenna exchanged a glance with Max. Sybil leaned back in her chair, her green eyes glittering. The seal is more than a protection spell. It's a bond forged through blood and intention. If you want to maintain it, you'll need to embrace your role as keeper fully. And how do I do that? Jenna asked. Sybil smiled faintly. By connecting with the moon. The bond requires a ritual, one that involves your bloodline, your intentions, and the moon's energy. Jenna's stomach twisted. That sounds intense. It is, Sybil said bluntly, but you've already proven your strength. Restoring the seal the other night wasn't beginner's luck. You have the gift, you just need to learn how to use it. Max leaned forward. And what about the pack, Lucas and the rogues? Sybil's expression darkened. The pack will stop at nothing to control the keeper's power. The seal threatens their dominance, and Lucas doesn't like being threatened. Jenna's chest tightened. What do we do? Strengthen the seal, Sybil said firmly. And quickly. The full bond will protect this place and you from whatever they replanning. Jenna nodded, determination hardening in her chest. What do I need for the ritual? Sybil smiled, rising from her chair to rummage through a shelf. She returned with a small silver dagger and a vial of shimmering liquid. You'll need this, she said, handing them to Jenna. The dagger will cut the bond, and the vial will help channel the moon's energy. Perform the ritual under the next full moon, and the seal will be unbreakable. Jenna took the items, their weight grounding her. Thank you. Sybil inclined her head. Just remember, child power comes with a cost. Be sure you're ready to pay it. As they drove back to town, Jenna stared out the window, her mind racing. The weight of her family's legacy felt heavier than ever, but for the first time she also felt a spark of hope. What Sybil said about the cost, Jenna murmured. Do you think she's right? Max glanced at her, his expression unreadable. There's always a cost, Jenna, but you're not in this alone. His words settled over her like a bomb, easing the tension in her chest. Together, they would face whatever came next. Chapter 9. The gathering storm. The days leading up to the next full moon were a blur of preparation, tension, and mounting unease. Jenna and Max spent hours in the bakery after hours, poring over the journal and practicing the steps of the ritual Sybil had outlined. Despite her nerves, Jenna felt a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just about protecting the bakery anymore, it was about claiming the role her grandmother had passed down to her. But as the moon waxed brighter each night, the storm clouds of danger gathered. One evening, Jenna was restocking the shelves when the bakery door swung open. She turned to see Mrs. Abernathy, one of her regulars, but the older woman's cheerful demeanor was replaced by unease. "Jenna," she said, her voice low, "I hate to trouble you, but I overheard something strange at the market today." "What is it?" Jenna asked, setting down a tray of cookies. "There's a group of strangers in town," Mrs. Abernathy whispered, glancing over her shoulder as though she expected to see them. "They've been asking questions about you, about Max." Jenna's stomach dropped. Did they say what they wanted? No, but... Mrs. Abernathy hesitated, lowering her voice further. "Didn't he seem like the friendly type? Be careful, dear." Jenna forced a smile. "Thanks for letting me know. I'll be careful." Mrs. Abernathy nodded and left, the bell jingling faintly behind her. Jenna locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and called Max. "They here," she said as soon as he answered. "Max, didn't he ask who? I'll be there in 10 minutes. Stay inside and lock the doors." Max arrived in record time, his face set in grim determination. He checked the locks on the doors and windows before joining Jenna at the counter. "Do you think it's Lucas?" Jenna asked. "It's him," Max said darkly. "He's testing you, trying to intimidate you before the full moon." Jenna's chest tightened. "What do we do?" "We stick to the plan," Max said firmly. "The seal is the only thing keeping them at bay. Once it's fully restored, they'll have no power here." "But what if they attack before the full moon?" Max hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Then we fight." His calm resolve both comforted and terrified her. That night, Jenna woke to the sound of scratching at her bedroom window. Her heart leapt into her throat as she sat up, the dim light of the moon casting eerie shadows across the room. The sound came again, a deliberate scrape that set her nerves on edge. "Max," she whispered, reaching for her phone. Before she could dial, a voice rasped from outside. "Jenna." She froze, the voice chillingly familiar. "Lucas." "Let me in," he called, his tone mockingly sweet. "We just want to talk." Her hands shook as she clutched her phone. "Leave me alone." The scratching stopped, replaced by a low chuckle. "You've got spirit. I can see why Max likes you. Get out of here." Jenna shouted, her voice stronger this time. Lucas's tone darkened. "You can hide behind him forever, Jenna. He can protect you from what's coming." The sound of retreating footsteps faded into the night, leaving Jenna trembling. She called Max, her words spilling out in a rush as she told him what had happened. "I am coming over," he said immediately. "Don't open the door for anyone." Max stayed with Jenna for the rest of the night, his presence a reassuring anchor as she tried to calm her racing thoughts. By morning, she was determined not to let Lucas's threats rattle her. She was a keeper, and she wouldn't let fear control her. The final day before the full moon arrived with an ominous stillness. The bakery was unusually quiet, the usual bustle of customers replaced by an uneasy calm. Jenna felt it in her bones, the sense of something waiting, watching. As night fell, Max and Jenna made their final preparations. The items for the ritual were laid out in the center of the bakery, the moonlight filtering through the front windows. "You ready for this?" Max said, his voice steady. Jenna nodded, though her heart was pounding. "What if it doesn't work?" "It will," Max said, his gaze unwavering. "You've already proven you're stronger than you think." His confidence in her was humbling, and Jenna drew strength from it. But as the hours ticked closer to midnight, the stillness outside the bakery gave way to movement. Shadows flitted across the street, and the air grew heavy with tension. "They here," Max said grimly, his senses sharpening. Jenna glanced at the door, her stomach twisting. "How many?" "Too many," Max said, his voice tight. The sound of claws scraping against wood echoed through the bakery, followed by a low, menacing growl. Jenna took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the silver dagger at her side. "We finish the ritual, no matter what." Max nodded, his claws already extending as his body prepared for the inevitable fight. The storm had arrived, and this time there was no turning back. Chapter 10, The forbidden recipe, the bakery trembled under the assault. Growls, snarls, and the splintering sound of claws scraping against wood filled the air. Jenna stood in the center of the room, clutching the silver dagger, her heart pounding like a drum. Max moved to the door, his body partially transformed. His claws glinted in the dim light, and his silver eyes scanned the shadows outside. "They retesting the seal again," he growled, trying to find a weak spot. "Will it hold?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For now, Max replied, his tone grim, "But they keep coming. We need to finish the ritual." Jenna nodded, forcing herself to focus. She knelt by the ingredients laid out on the floor: salt, sugar, the shimmering vial Sybil had given her, and the silver dagger. The journal lay open beside her, its instructions a lifeline. The words of her grandmother echoed in her mind: the keeper's bond is forged through sacrifice and intention. Blood binds the seal. The moon strengthens it. She took a deep breath and picked up the dagger. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Max asked, his voice softening. "No," Jenna admitted, "but I don't think I have a choice." Max crouched beside her, his presence steady and grounding. "You're not alone, Jenna. Whatever happens, I am with you." His words gave her the courage she needed. Jenna turned her attention to the ingredients, mixing them with precision as instructed in the journal. The flour and salt formed a base, the sugar added to symbolize harmony, and the moonlit vial poured in a slow, deliberate stream. The mixture glowed faintly, a soft silver light that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. When the concoction was ready, Jenna picked up the dagger. Her hands shook as she pressed the blade against her palm, the sharp sting of the cut making her wince. Blood welled up, red against the silver glow of the mixture. "By the light of the moon and the keeper's bond, I renew the seal," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let it protect this place and all within." As her blood dripped into the mixture, a surge of energy rippled through the room. The symbol of the crescent moon on the bakery floor blazed with light, its intricate patterns spreading outward in a radiant glow. The growls outside turned to snarls of frustration. The rogues were pressing harder now, their attacks growing more desperate. "We're running out of time," Max warned, his gaze flicking to the windows. Jenna grabbed the bowl of glowing mixture and stood, moving to the front of the bakery. The journal had been clear: the seal had to be spread across the threshold and the windows, creating an unbroken barrier of protection. "Cover me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Max nodded and positioned himself near the door, his claws ready. As Jenna worked, the rogues' attacks intensified. One of them slammed into the door with enough force to crack the wood, and Max lunged to reinforce it, his claws digging into the frame. "Keep going," he shouted over the chaos. Jenna spread the glowing mixture along the edges of the door and windows, her hands moving with frantic precision. The energy in the air grew stronger with each stroke, a hum of power that seemed to resonate with her very soul. When the last line was complete, the mixture flared brilliantly, and the crescent moon's symbol on the floor pulsed with light. A wave of energy burst outward, knocking Jenna to the ground. The growls and snarls outside turned to cries of pain as the rogues were thrown back by the seal's power. Jenna scrambled to her feet, her heart racing as she watched the light settle into a faint, steady glow. "Did it work?" she asked, turning to Max. He stared at the door, his chest heaving. "For now." But even as he spoke, a sharp howl pierced the air. It wasn't a rogue. This sound was deeper, more commanding, a call to arms. Jenna's blood ran cold. "What is that?" Max's expression darkened. "Lucas." The door splintered under a powerful blow, and Lucas stepped inside. He looked almost human, but his eyes glowed a fiery yellow and his aura radiated dominance. "Impressive," he said, his voice smooth. "You've managed to strengthen the seal. I didn't think you had it in you, Jenna." "Get out," Jenna said, gripping the dagger tightly. Lucas chuckled. Now, is that any way to greet an old friend?" "She's not your friend," Max growled, stepping between Lucas and Jenna. Lucas's gaze shifted to Max, his smile fading. Still playing the hero, I see. Tell me, Max, how long do you think you can protect her? The seal 1T last forever. It'll last long enough to stop you, Max said, his voice cold. Lucas's expression darkened, his claws extending as he took a step forward. You can stop me, Max. You couldn't even protect your own pack. Max lunged with a roar, their bodies colliding in a blur of claws and teeth. Jenna stumbled back, the dagger slipping from her grip as the fight erupted. Lucas was fast, his movements fluid and brutal, but Max held his ground, his attacks fueled by raw determination. Jenna's eyes darted to the glowing seal on the floor. She knew it was their only hope, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The keeper's bond is forged through sacrifice. Jenna grabbed the dagger, her hand tightening around the hilt. She didn't know what she was about to do, but she knew she had to act. Max, she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. He turned, just as Lucas lunged for him. Jenna threw herself forward, slashing the dagger across Lucas's arm. The blade flared with light, and Lucas let out a howl of pain, recoiling as smoke rose from the wound. The crescent moon symbol on the floor pulsed brighter, its energy surging as if in response to her action. Lucas snarled, his eyes blazing. This isn't over, Keeper. With a final glare, he turned and disappeared into the night, the rogues following close behind. The silence that followed was deafening. Jenna dropped the dagger, her legs giving out as she sank to the floor. Max was beside her in an instant, his hands steadying her. Are you okay? He asked, his voice rough. I think so, she said, her breath shaky. Did we win? For now, Max said, his gaze lingering on the glowing seal, but they'll be back. Jenna nodded, exhaustion settling over her. Then we'll be ready. Max smiled faintly, his eyes softening. You were amazing, Jenna. Her cheeks flushed, but before she could respond, the crescent moon symbol dimmed, its light fading into the floorboards. The storm had passed, but Jenna knew the battle was far from over. For the first time, though, she felt ready. She was a keeper, and she wasn't going down without a fight. Chapter 11, Moonlit Truths. The night after the attack was quieter than Jenna expected. The air outside the bakery felt heavy with tension, but no howls echoed through the streets, and no claws scraped against the doors. The rogues had retreated, for now, leaving Jenna and Max with the fragile peace of an uneasy victory. Despite her exhaustion, Jenna couldn't sleep. She sat at the bakery's counter, the silver dagger resting beside her as she leafed through the journal once more. Each page felt alive now, its words charged with a meaning she hadn't fully grasped before. Max sat across from her, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. He hadn't shifted back completely, his claws were still visible, and his silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. You should rest, he said, breaking the silence. I can, Jenna replied, not looking up. There's still so much I don't understand. About the seal, about the bond. About me. Max leaned forward, his gaze steady. What do you want to know? Jenna hesitated, then set the journal down. Lucas called me the keeper like it was. Significant. Like it's more than just maintaining the seal. Is it? Max nodded slowly. It is. Being a keeper isn't just about protecting a place, it's about balancing the forces that come with it. The seal doesn't just protect the bakery, it protects the town, and everyone in it. That's why Lucas and the rogues want it gone. Without the seal, the town would be vulnerable to their kind. Jenna frowned. But why me? I didn't choose this. No one chooses their legacy, Max said softly. Your grandmother didn't choose it either. But she embraced it. And she believed you would too. The weight of his words settled over her, heavy but not unbearable. Jenna traced the crescent moon etched into the cover of the journal, a quiet determination stirring within her. Did Lucas mean it when he said the seal 1T last forever? She asked. Max's expression darkened. The seal is strong now, but it's not invincible. Every keeper strengthens it, but the forces working against it grow stronger too. That's why your role is so important. Jenna looked up at him, her voice steady. Then I'll make it stronger. Whatever it takes. The next morning, the bakery reopened as usual, though Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that every customer knew something was different. Mrs. Abernathy stopped by, her kind eyes lingering on Jenna as she ordered her usual tea and cookies. "You're looking tired, dear," she said. "Everything all right?" Jenna smiled faintly. "Just busy. The bakery's been keeping me on my toes." Mrs. Abernathy nodded, but there was a knowing glint in her eyes. "Well, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Jenna watched her leave, a strange warmth settling in her chest. The townsfolk may not have known the truth about the seal, but their quiet support was a reminder of what she was fighting to protect. That evening, Max and Jenna sat by the bakery's back door, watching the moon rise over the woods. The silence between them was comfortable, a rare moment of peace after days of chaos. "What happens now?" Jenna asked, breaking the quiet. "We prepare," Max said simply. "For what?" Max hesitated, his gaze fixed on the moon. "Lucas isn't done with us. The seal may have held him back, but he won't stop until he has destroyed it or taken control of it." Jenna's chest tightened. "Why does he want it so badly?" "Power," Max said, his voice bitter. With the seal under his control, Lucas could expand his territory, draw more rogues to his side. He's building something a pack of his own, one that doesn't follow the old rules. Jenna frowned. "And you sure he was part of your old pack?" Max nodded. "Lucas was my Alpha's second in command. When I left, he stayed behind, but something must have changed. He wouldn't be out here on his own unless he had a plan." Jenna's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of Max's past and the threats they now faced. "Do you regret leaving?" she asked quietly. Max's expression softened. "No, I regret what I lost, but not why I left. I couldn't stay in a pack that saw power as the only thing worth protecting." Jenna studied him, her heart aching at the weight he carried. "You didn't just leave them, did you? You defied them." Max gave a faint smile. "You catch on fast." "Why?" His silver eyes met hers, a flicker of vulnerability shining through. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I stayed. And now," he hesitated, his voice softening, "now I have something worth protecting again." Jenna's breath caught, her cheeks warming. She didn't know how to respond, but before she could say anything, a low howl echoed in the distance. Max's body tensed, his claws extending instinctively. "They retesting the boundaries again," he said, his voice sharp. Jenna stood, her hand resting on the dagger at her side. "Then we let them know the boundaries are still there." Max's lips curved into a faint smile. "You really are a keeper." As they prepared to face whatever came next, Jenna felt a surge of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The moonlight bathed the bakery, its silvery glow a reminder of the bond she was beginning to understand and the battle she was ready to fight. The rogues were still out there, and Lucas was far from finished. But neither was she. Chapter 12, The Rival Pack the night after the howls. A heavy unease hung over the town like a storm cloud. Jenna kept her resolve as she opened the bakery, her movements steady, even as her mind churned with thoughts of Lucas and the growing threat outside. The morning rush passed quietly, but Jenna couldn't ignore the prickling sensation at the back of her neck, as though she were being watched. She glanced toward the windows often, half expecting to see glowing eyes in the shadows. When the doorbell jingled late in the afternoon, she looked up, her breath catching. Two strangers entered the bakery. One was a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark hair and an intimidating presence. The other was a petite woman with short, silvery hair that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Their movements were too smooth, two deliberate wolves hiding behind human skin. Jenna tightened her grip on the counter, keeping her expression neutral. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "We were just passing through town and heard about your famous moon-shaped cookies. Thought we'd see what the fuss was about." His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it that made Jenna's skin crawl. "Of course," she said, forcing a polite smile. She boxed up a dozen cookies and slid them across the counter. "That'll be 12. The woman stepped closer, her piercing blue eyes locking onto Jenna's. "You smell different," she said, her voice low and almost reverent. Jenna froze, her heart pounding. "Excuse me." "Enough," the man said sharply, shooting the woman a warning look. He slid a 20 bill across the counter. "Keep the change." Jenna took the money with trembling fingers, her eyes never leaving the pair as they turned to leave. The woman glanced back, her smile unnerving. "Good cookies," she said. "We'll be back." As the door closed behind them, Jenna let out a shaky breath and immediately texted Max. 2 wolves in the bakery. Not rogues, different. His reply was almost instant. "Stay there, I am coming." Max arrived within minutes, his expression grim. Jenna relayed what had happened, her hands still trembling as she recounted the woman's strange remark. "They re not rogues," Max said after a moment, pacing the length of the bakery. "Rogues don't pay for cookies or try to blend in. These 2 are part of a pack. A rival pack?" Jenna asked. Max nodded. "Probably. Not all packs follow the same rules, but showing up here isn't a coincidence. Lucas is trying to pressure us from all sides." Jenna frowned. "Why would they care about the seal?" "The seal doesn't just protect this bakery," Max explained. "It's part of a larger network of protections. Packs like Lucas see it as a threat to their expansion, while rival packs see it as an opportunity to gain leverage. If they take control of the seal, they control this territory." The weight of his words settled over her. "So what do we do?" Max's eyes gleamed with determination. "We find out who they are and why they here. But first we make sure you safe." Jenna nodded, but her mind was already racing. She wasn't content to sit back and wait for the next attack. That night, Jenna and Max worked together to strengthen the seal. Jenna followed the journal's instructions, adding new layers of protection to the existing boundary. Max kept watch, his senses heightened as the moonlight streamed through the windows. As the hours passed, a sense of unity settled between them. They worked in sync, their movements reflecting an unspoken understanding. "You're getting the hang of this," Max said as Jenna carefully inscribed a crescent moon symbol near the back door. "Thanks," she replied, managing a small smile. "It helps to have a good teacher." Max chuckled, but his expression turned serious. "You're doing more than most would in your position, Jenna. You're stronger than you think." Her cheeks warmed at the compliment, but before she could respond, the sound of footsteps outside the bakery made them both freeze. Max moved toward the door, his body tense. He opened it cautiously, stepping outside into the cool night air. Jenna followed, her heart pounding. Standing in the alley were the 2 wolves from earlier, their expressions unreadable. "Max," the man said, inclining his head. "It's been a long time." Max's jaw tightened. "Victor." Jenna's stomach sank. Max knew them. "What do you want?" Max asked, his voice low. Victor smiled faintly. "To talk. No claws, no blood, just a conversation." Max glanced at Jenna, his eyes questioning. She gave a small nod, though her pulse quickened. "Fine," Max said. "Talk." Victor's expression turned serious. "We're not here to fight. Lucas is a threat to all of us, but his actions don't reflect the rest of us. My pack wants to make sure the seal stays intact." "Why?" Jenna asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "The seal's balance affects more than just this town," Victor said. "If Lucas breaks it, the ripple effect could destabilize the entire region. No one wants that except him." Max folded his arms, his expression skeptical. "And you expect us to trust you?" "You don't have to trust us," Victor replied, "but you might need us." The woman with silvery hair stepped forward. "We're not enemies, Keeper," she said, her tone softer than before. "We're offering an alliance." Jenna exchanged a glance with Max, her mind spinning. An alliance? It sounded too good to be true. "And if we say no?" Max asked. Victor's eyes gleamed. "Then you'll face Lucas alone, and trust me, you don't want that." The weight of the decision pressed down on Jenna. Could she trust them, or was this just another trap? "We'll think about it," Max said finally, his tone guarded. Victor nodded. "You know where to find us." As the pair disappeared into the night, Jenna turned to Max, her chest tight with uncertainty. "What do you think?" she asked. Max's expression was grim. "I think we're running out of time." The moon hung high above them, casting its silver light over the town. The storm was far from over, and the battle was only beginning. Chapter 13, The Bakery Siege. The following day, a dense fog blanketed the town, muffling sound and blurring the edges of the familiar streets. Jenna stared out the bakery window as the first customers trickled in, but her mind was elsewhere on Victor, his cryptic offer of an alliance, and the weight of the decisions that lay ahead. Max sat at a corner table, nursing a black coffee and keeping watch. His presence was reassuring, but Jenna couldn't ignore the tension in his posture or the way his eyes flicked to every movement outside. By midday, the bakery was quiet again, the streets outside eerily empty. Jenna locked the front door and flipped the closed sign, her heart heavy with unease. "You feel it, don't you?" Max said, coming up beside her. Jenna nodded. "It's like the whole town is holding its breath." "They re-moving," Max said grimly. "Lucas and his rogues. They know the full moon's almost here, and they want to wait for us to make the first move." Jenna turned to face him. "What do we do?" Max hesitated, his silver eyes meeting hers. "We hold the bakery. It's the heart of the seal. If they take it, they take everything." Jenna's stomach twisted. The bakery wasn't just her livelihood anymore, it was the battleground for something much bigger. As dusk fell, the fog thickened, wrapping around the bakery like a shroud. Jenna and Max worked in tense silence, reinforcing the seal with everything they had. Jenna traced crescent moon symbols along the walls, her grandmother's journal open beside her. Max patrolled the perimeter, his sharp senses attuned to every sound. By the time the moon rose, the air was electric with anticipation. And then the attack began. It started with a low growl, deep and guttural, echoing through the fog. Jenna froze, her hand tightening around the silver dagger at her side. "They re-here," Max said, his voice steady but taut. The first rogue hit the front door with a deafening crash, the impact rattling the windows. Max was there in an instant, his body half shifted as he braced against the door. "Keep working on the seal," he shouted over the noise. Jenna nodded, her heart pounding as she moved to the back of the bakery. She spread a fresh layer of the glowing mixture along the rear door frame, her hands trembling as the sounds of the attack grew louder. Another crash came, this time from the side window. Jenna turned just in time to see a rogue's clawed hand reaching through the shattered glass. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed a jar of coarse salt and hurled it at the intruder. The rogue howled in pain, smoke rising from its skin as it recoiled. "Jenna!" Max's voice rang out. She turned to see him locked in a brutal struggle with two rogues. Their claws raked at him, but Max held his ground, his movements a blur of speed and strength. "Finish the seal," he shouted, his voice raw. Jenna's gaze darted to the journal. The final step, she hadn't completed it yet. She grabbed the bowl of glowing mixture and moved to the center of the bakery, where the crescent moon symbol was etched into the floor. Her hands trembled as she knelt, pouring the mixture over the symbol and whispering the incantation she had memorized by the light of the moon, by the Keeper's bond. "I strengthen the seal. Let no shadow cross this threshold." The symbol flared with light, its intricate patterns spreading outward in a web of glowing lines. The air hummed with power, and Jenna felt a surge of energy course through her. Outside, the rogues howled in frustration. The light seemed to repel them, forcing them back into the fog. For a moment, Jenna thought they might retreat. But then the front door exploded inward. Lucas strode into the bakery, his glowing yellow eyes locked on Jenna. His presence was suffocating, his aura radiating dominance. "Impressive," he said, his voice smooth. "You've managed to strengthen the seal, but it won't save you." Max growled, stepping between Jenna and Lucas. "You're not getting past me." Lucas smirked. "We'll see about that." The two wolves clashed, their movements a blur of claws and teeth. The sound of their fight echoed through the bakery, each blow reverberating through Jenna's chest. She clutched the dagger, her mind racing. She couldn't just stand by while Max fought alone. Summoning her courage, Jenna lunged forward, slashing at one of the rogues that had slipped past Max. The silver blade cut deep, and the rogue howled in pain, retreating. Lucas snarled, his attention snapping to her. "You've got fire, Keeper," he said, his tone mocking, "but you re out of your depth." Jenna raised the dagger, her hands shaking. "Try me." Lucas lunged at her, but before he could reach her, Max intercepted him with a ferocious roar. The two wolves tumbled to the ground, their fight spilling into the center of the bakery. The crescent moon symbol flared brighter, its energy reacting to the battle. Jenna felt the hum of its power, a connection that resonated deep within her. "This is your moment, Jenna," Max shouted, his voice strained. "Use it." Jenna didn't hesitate. She knelt beside the glowing symbol, pressing her bloodied palm against it. A surge of energy exploded outward, the light blinding in its intensity. Lucas and the rogues screamed as the energy engulfed them, forcing them back. The light expanded, driving them out of the bakery and into the fog. When the light faded, the bakery was silent. Jenna collapsed to the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion. Max was beside her in an instant, his face bloodied but alive. "You did it," he said, his voice soft. Jenna looked at the crescent moon symbol, now glowing faintly in the floorboards. "Is it over?" "For now," Max said. The seal held. They wouldn't be able to cross it again. Relief washed over her, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the battle wasn't truly over. Lucas was still out there, and his thirst for power hadn't been quenched. But as Jenna looked at Max, his silver eyes filled with quiet pride, she knew they had won this fight together. And they would face whatever came next the same way, together. Chapter 14, Bonds Forged in Fire. The bakery was eerily quiet in the aftermath of the siege. The faint glow of the reinforced seal shimmered in the floorboards, a constant reminder of what they had endured. Jenna sat slumped against the counter, her fingers wrapped tightly around the silver dagger. Her body ached from the effort of wielding the seal's power, but the adrenaline had yet to fade. Max crouched beside her, his silver eyes scanning her face. "You should rest," he said softly. "I am fine," Jenna replied, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. Max shook his head. "You've done more than anyone could have asked, Jenna. Let me handle the rest." She glanced around the bakery, the faint scent of smoke and blood lingering in the air. The shattered door, the broken display case, the claw marks gouged into the walls. This wasn't the sanctuary it once was. "This is my fight too," she said, meeting his gaze. Max's lips curved into a faint smile, his expression a mixture of admiration and worry. "I know. But it doesn't mean you have to do it alone." The weight of his words settled over her, comforting in its simplicity. The morning came slowly, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the cracked windows. Jenna and Max worked together to clean up the wreckage, their movements quiet and efficient. The bakery was more than just a building, it was a symbol of Jenna's connection to her grandmother, her family's legacy, and now the town itself. As they worked, Jenna found herself glancing at Max more often than she intended. His strength, his calm under pressure, and his unwavering support had become her anchor in the chaos. At one point, Max caught her staring. "What?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Nothing," Jenna said quickly, feeling her cheeks warm. Max chuckled, the sound breaking through the tension that lingered between them. But the moment was short-lived. The sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention, and Jenna's heart leapt into her throat. She grabbed the silver dagger from the counter, her body tense. Max moved to the door, his claws extending. The tension eased slightly when Victor and the silver-haired woman, whom Jenna now knew as Kira, appeared outside the bakery. They looked unharmed, but their expressions were grim. "Thought we'd check in," Victor said, stepping inside. His gaze swept over the damage, his brows furrowing. "Looks like you had a hell of a night." "You could say that," Max replied, his tone guarded. Kira approached the glowing seal on the floor, her head tilting slightly as she studied it. "You strengthened it," she said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "Impressive." Jenna stepped forward, her grip tightening on the dagger. "What do you want?" "We're here to help," Victor said, his tone calm. "Lucas is regrouping, and he's more determined than ever. You're going to need allies if you want to keep him at bay." Max folded his arms. And why should we trust you? Because we want the same thing, Victor replied. Lucas isn't he just a threat to you, he's a threat to all of us. If he takes control of the seal, he'll tip the balance of power in ways none of us can afford. Kira turned to Jenna, her blue eyes piercing. You've already proven you're strong enough to protect this place, but strength alone won't be enough. Lucas is building an army. You need more than just the two of you. Jenna exchanged a glance with Max. She could see the hesitation in his eyes, the wariness that came from years of betrayal and loss. But she also knew they couldn't fight this battle alone. What do you propose? Jenna asked, her voice steady. Victor's lips curved into a faint smile. An alliance. We share information, resources, and manpower. Lucas wants to rule through fear, but we can stand against him together. Max's jaw tightened. And what do you get out of it? Survival, Victor said bluntly, and the chance to stop a tyrant before he gains too much power. Jenna's heart raced as she considered the offer. Trusting Victor and Kira was a risk, but so was refusing their help. Max turned to her, his expression unreadable. It's your call, Jenna. She swallowed hard, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. We accept, she said finally. Victor extended his hand, his smile genuine this time. You won't regret it. As Jenna shook his hand, a sense of determination settled over her. The road ahead would be dangerous, but she wasn't facing it alone, and for the first time she felt a flicker of hope. Later that evening, after Victor and Kira left to prepare their pack, Jenna and Max stood outside the bakery, the crescent moon rising high above them. You sure about this? Max asked, his voice quiet. No, Jenna admitted, but I don't think we have a choice. Max nodded, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then we'll make it work. Jenna looked at him, the warmth of his presence easing her fears. We will. As the moonlight bathed the town, Jenna felt the bond between them deepen, a connection forged through fire and battle, strengthened by trust. And though the storm still loomed, she knew they were ready to face it together. Chapter 15, the Crescent marked the alliance with Victor and Kira's pack brought a fragile sense of security, but the days that followed were filled with unease. Jenna could feel the tension mounting, a silent countdown to the inevitable clash with Lucas. She threw herself into preparing the bakery and reinforcing the seal, drawing strength from Max and the support of their new allies. Yet, no amount of effort could quiet the nagging feeling that something fundamental about her role as keeper remained undiscovered. It wasn't until the night of the waxing moon, when she stood alone in the bakery, that the truth began to reveal itself. The moonlight streamed through the windows, casting silvery patterns across the floor. Jenna ran her fingers over the crescent moon symbol, its faint glow a reminder of the power she had called forth. As she touched it, a strange warmth spread through her hand, traveling up her arm and settling deep in her chest. Her breath caught, and she stumbled back, clutching the counter for support. Jenna, Max's voice called from the doorway. She looked up to see him striding toward her, his expression sharp with concern. I am fine, she said quickly, though her heart was racing. You don't look fine, Max said, his silver eyes narrowing. Jenna hesitated, then held out her hand. The faint outline of a crescent moon had appeared on her palm, glowing softly against her skin. Max's expression darkened. That's the keeper's mark. The what? Jenna asked, her voice trembling. Max stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the mark. It's a symbol of your connection to the seal and to the moon's power. I've only seen it once before on a keeper who was extraordinary. Jenna stared at the mark, a mixture of awe and fear swirling in her chest. Why now? Why is it showing up now? Because you've fully bonded with the seal, Max said. The ritual you performed didn't just restore it, it awakened something in you. Her knees felt weak, and she sank onto a stool. What does it mean? It means your connection to the seal is stronger than anyone realized, Max said softly. But it also makes you a target. Lucas will know what that mark means, and he'll come for you. Jenna swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Then we need to be ready. The next morning, Jenna called a meeting with Victor, Kira, and Max in the bakery-esque kitchen. The mark on her palm was still visible, a faint glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "This changes things," Victor said, his tone serious as he studied the mark. "The Keeper S mark is rare, even among those who inherit the role. It means you re more than just a protector, you re a conduit for the Seal S power." "Great," Jenna muttered, rubbing her temples. No pressure or anything. Kira's expression softened. "It's not just a burden, Jenna. It's a gift. The mark gives you access to the Moon's energy in ways others can t. You can use it to strengthen the seal, to protect yourself and this town. But it also puts a target on my back," Jenna said, glancing at Max. Victor nodded. "Lucas will see you as a threat and an opportunity. If he can take control of you, he can manipulate the Seal's power to his advantage." Jenna's stomach twisted. "How do we stop him?" "You need to learn how to wield the Mark's power," Kira said. "Sybil might be able to help. She knows more about the old ways than anyone." Max frowned. "Going to Sybil again is risky. Lucas's rogues could be watching her." "Then we'll go together," Jenna said firmly. "I am not sitting around and waiting for Lucas to make the next move." Max sighed but nodded. "All right. But we'll need to be careful." The journey to Sybil's cabin felt longer than before, the weight of Jenna's newfound power hanging over them. Max stayed close to her side, his sharp senses on high alert as they moved through the dense woods. When they arrived, Sybil greeted them with her usual knowing smirk. Well, she said, her green eyes glinting. "I was wondering when you'd show up again." Jenna held out her hand, revealing the glowing mark. "What is this?" Sybil's smile faded, replaced by an expression of reverence. "The Crescent mark," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "It's been decades since I've seen one." "What does it mean?" Jenna asked. Sybil motioned for them to sit, her movements uncharacteristically subdued. "The mark is a symbol of the Keeper's bond with the Moon's energy. It means the seal isn't just tied to this place, it's tied to you. You re its anchor now." Jenna's throat tightened. "Anchor?" "The seal draws its strength from you," Sybil explained. "As long as you live, it will endure. But if Lucas or anyone else were to corrupt that bond, the seal would fall," Max finished grimly. Sybil nodded. "And everything you've fought to protect would be lost." Jenna's pulse quickened. "How do I protect it? How do I use the mark?" "You'll need to train," Sybil said. "The mark gives you access to the Moon's energy, but without control, it's as dangerous to you as it is to your enemies. You'll need to learn how to channel it, to wield it without letting it consume you." Max's expression darkened. "And how long does that take?" Sybil gave a wry smile. "Depends on the Keeper. Some take years. But in your case," she studied Jenna carefully, "you'd have years. Lucas is moving fast and you'll need to keep up." Jenna squared her shoulders, determination hardening her voice. "Then we start now." Under Sybil's guidance, Jenna began her training. It was grueling work learning to focus her thoughts, to draw energy from the moonlight without letting it overwhelm her. Each session left her drained but more confident in her abilities. Max watched from the sidelines, his steady presence a constant source of support. "You're doing great," he said one evening as they walked back to the bakery under the glow of the crescent moon. "Thanks," Jenna said, her exhaustion softened by his words. "But it's not enough, is it?" Max hesitated. "You're stronger than you think, Jenna. But Lucas, he's not going to wait for you to be ready." Jenna looked up at the moon, its light reflected in Max's silver eyes. "Then we'll face him together." Max smiled faintly, his voice quiet but resolute. "Always." As the moon rose higher, casting its light over the town, Jenna felt a spark of hope amid the uncertainty. The mark on her palm was more than a burden, it was a promise, and she was ready to fulfill it. Chapter 16, The Alpha-S Challenge. The days leading up to the next full moon passed in a tense blur. Jenna's training with Sybil intensified, each session leaving her physically and emotionally drained. The crescent mark glowed brighter with each lesson, a sign of her growing connection to the seal and the immense power she was learning to control. Max, ever vigilant, spent most nights patrolling the town with Victor and Kira. Their alliance with the rival pack had brought much-needed reinforcements, but it was a fragile truce, held together by the shared threat of Lucas. Jenna could feel the weight of the upcoming battle pressing down on her, but she refused to let it break her. She had come too far to falter now. The night of the full moon arrived with an almost suffocating stillness. Jenna stood in the bakery, staring at the crescent moon symbol glowing faintly on the floor. Max was beside her, his silver eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. "They'll come tonight," Max said, his voice low. Jenna nodded. "I know. We re-ready," he added, his tone firm. Jenna wished she felt the same confidence. Despite all her training, she couldn't shake the fear that she might not be enough to protect the seal or the people she cared about. As if sensing her unease, Max stepped closer, his presence grounding her. "Jenna," he said softly, "you re stronger than you think. You've already done more than anyone could have asked. Whatever happens tonight, you're not facing it alone." His words brought a flicker of reassurance, and she managed a small smile. "Thank you, Max." He returned her smile, but the moment was interrupted by the sound of distant howls. "They re-hear," Max said, his expression darkening. The first wave of rogues came just after midnight, their snarls and growls echoing through the streets. Jenna and Max stood at the bakery-s entrance, flanked by Victor, Kira, and several members of their pack. The air was charged with tension, the kind that made every hair on Jenna's body stand on end. The rogues surged forward, their eyes glowing with feral hunger. The first of them hit the invisible barrier of the seal, their snarls turning to cries of frustration as the protective energy repelled them. But the attacks didn't stop. More rogues joined the assault, their combined strength pressing against the seal. "It's holding," Kira said, her voice tense. "For now," Max replied grimly. Jenna stood behind them, the crescent mark on her palm glowing faintly. She could feel the seal's energy resonating within her, a constant hum that grew louder with each passing moment. Then Lucas appeared. He stepped out of the shadows, his towering form illuminated by the pale light of the full moon. His golden eyes burned with determination, and his lips curled into a mocking smile. "Impressive," he said, his voice carrying over the chaos. "You've made it this far, Keeper. But let us see how long you can hold out." With a wave of his hand, the rogues redoubled their efforts, their claws tearing at the barrier. The seal flickered, its energy straining under the relentless assault. Jenna's heart raced. She knew the seal wouldn't hold much longer. "We need to draw him out," Victor said, his eyes locked on Lucas. "I'll handle it," Max said, stepping forward. Jenna grabbed his arm. "No, you can face him alone." Max turned to her, his expression resolute. "I have to, Jenna. If we don't stop him, none of this will matter." Jenna's grip tightened. "Then I am coming with you." Max hesitated, his silver eyes searching hers. Finally, he nodded. "Stay close." Max and Jenna stepped outside the bakery, the night air heavy with tension. Lucas watched them approach, his smile widening. "Max," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "It's been a while." "Not long enough," Max growled. Lucas chuckled. "Still the lone wolf, I see." "You should stayed with the pack, Max. We could ruled together." "I'd rather die than follow you," Max replied, his claws extending. Lucas's eyes flicked to Jenna. "And you, Keeper. Do you really think you can protect the seal? You don't even understand its full power." "I understand enough," Jenna said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Lucas laughed, the sound low and menacing. "Then let us see what you're capable of." He lunged. Max met him head-on, their bodies colliding with a bone-jarring impact. Claws and fangs flashed in the moonlight as they fought, their movements a blur of violence and precision. Jenna held back, her hands trembling as she watched. She could feel the crescent mark pulsing with energy, urging her to act. "You're not powerless," she reminded herself. As Lucas gained the upper hand, pinning Max to the ground, Jenna stepped forward. She raised her hand, the mark on her palm blazing with light. "Lucas." She shouted. He turned, his golden eyes narrowing as the light enveloped him. Jenna focused all her energy on the seal, channeling its power through the mark. The ground beneath Lucas trembled, the crescent moon symbol glowing brighter as the energy surged toward him. Lucas staggered back, his snarl turning to a roar of pain. The light engulfed him, forcing him to retreat. "You haven't T1," he growled, his voice echoing through the night. "This isn't T over." With a final glare, he disappeared into the shadows, the remaining rogues scattering after him. The silence that followed was deafening. Jenna sank to her knees, her body trembling from the effort of wielding the seal's power. Max was beside her in an instant, his hand steadying her. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "We did it," Jenna corrected, managing a faint smile. The crescent moon symbol on the ground pulsed one last time before fading, its energy settling into a steady hum. The seal had held. For now. As Jenna looked up at the moon, its light reflecting in Max's silver eyes, she felt a flicker of hope amid the exhaustion. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Chapter 17, A Dangerous Alliance. The victory over Lucas was hard-earned, but Jenna knew better than to let relief take hold for too long. The rogues had retreated, and the seal was intact, but the battle had revealed just how precarious their position was. Lucas wasn't defeated, he was regrouping, and his next attack would be even more dangerous. In the days that followed, the bakery became a hub of activity. Victor and Kira worked closely with Max, coordinating patrols and fortifying the town's defenses. Their alliance was tenuous, built on necessity rather than trust, but it was holding for now. Jenna focused on her training with Sybil, determined to understand the Crescent Mark's full potential. The Mark's power had saved them once, but she could feel its energy shifting, growing stronger and harder to control. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jenna sat with Max in the bakery, the soft glow of the crescent moon symbol casting faint light across the room. They were reviewing the journal, searching for anything that might give them an edge against Lucas. "You've been quiet," Max said, glancing at her. "Just thinking," Jenna replied, her brow furrowed. "About the mark, the seal, all of it." Max nodded, his silver eyes thoughtful. "It's a lot to carry. But you redoing it." Jenna gave him a small smile, but the weight of her thoughts didn't lift. "What if it's not enough, Max? Lucas is getting stronger and I can feel the mark pulling at me. I am afraid of what might happen if I lose control." Max reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "You won't lose control, you've got too much heart for that." His touch steadied her, and for a moment, the storm inside her quieted. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Jenna turned to see Victor and Kira entering the bakery, their expressions grim. "We've got a problem," Victor said, wasting no time. Jenna and Max exchanged a glance. "What kind of problem?" Max asked. "Lucas is making a move," Kira said. He reached out to the hunter. Jenna's stomach dropped. The hunter, Victor's jaw tightened. A rogue, werewolf hunter. He's ruthless and doesn't care about collateral damage. If Lucas has brought him into this, it means he's desperate, but it also means we're in serious trouble. Max's expression darkened. The hunter doesn't just kill wolves. He burns everything in his path. He'll come after the seal, the bakery, the whole town. Jenna felt a chill run through her. Why would Lucas work with someone like that? Wouldn't he be putting his own pack at risk? "Lucas thinks he can control the hunter," Victor said. He's arrogant enough to believe he can turn him into a weapon without getting burned himself. Kira leaned forward, her voice urgent. "If the hunter comes here, the seal won't be enough to stop him. We need to strike first, find him before he finds us." Max's claws extended instinctively, his anger barely contained. "And how do you suggest we do that?" "The hunter doesn't leave a trail." Victor smirked faintly. "Actually, he does." "We have a lead." Jenna's eyes widened. "Where?" Kira hesitated before answering. "A town about 50 miles from here. He was spotted a few days ago, meeting with someone from Lucas's pack. If we move quickly, we can intercept him before he gets any closer." Max turned to Jenna, his expression conflicted. This is dangerous. If we go after the hunter, we risk walking into a trap. And if we don T, Jenna asked, her voice steady. He'll come here and destroy everything. Max's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. We leave at dawn, Victor said. The next morning, Jenna, Max, Victor, and Kira set out for the neighboring town. The drive was tense, the weight of the mission hanging over them. Jenna stared out the window, her fingers brushing the crescent mark on her palm. Are you ready for this? Max asked quietly. I don't think I'll ever be ready, Jenna admitted, but I didn't have a choice. Max reached over, his hand resting briefly on hers. We'll get through this. Together. Jenna nodded, drawing strength from his presence. They arrived in the town just before noon, parking on the outskirts and proceeding on foot. Victor led the way, his sharp senses guiding them toward an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. This is it, Victor said, his voice low. Jenna's heart pounded as they approached the building, its broken windows and rusted walls casting eerie shadows in the midday sun. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and metal. The group moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. And then they saw him. The hunter stood in the center of the warehouse, his back to them. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his leather coat brushing the floor as he adjusted a weapon, a silver-plated crossbow. His presence radiated danger, and Jenna's breath caught in her throat. Careful, Max whispered. He knows we're here. The hunter turned slowly, his piercing gray eyes locking onto them. His expression was cold, calculating. Well, he said, his voice smooth and deep. If it isn't T the keeper and her entourage. Jenna's blood ran cold. We're not here to fight, Victor said, stepping forward. The hunter raised an eyebrow. No, then why are you here? To stop you, Jenna said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. The hunter's lips curled into a faint smile. Bold. But do you really think you can stop me? Lucas made me a tempting offer, and I always deliver on my promises. Lucas doesn't care about you, Max growled. He's using you to do his dirty work. The hunter chuckled. I don't care about Lucas. I care about results. And when I am finished, there won't be a seal or a keeper to worry about. Jenna stepped forward, her crescent mark flaring with light. You'll have to get through me first. The hunter's smile faded, replaced by a look of intrigue. Interesting, he said, his gaze lingering on the mark. Let us see what you're capable of, keeper. As the hunter raised his crossbow, Jenna braced herself, the power of the mark surging through her. The fight had begun. Chapter 18, The Hunter's Moon. The tension in the warehouse was electric, the air thick with the anticipation of violence. Jenna's crescent mark pulsed with light, casting faint silver patterns on the cracked concrete floor. Across from her, the hunter stood motionless, his crossbow leveled with deadly precision. Stay behind me, Max growled, stepping protectively in front of Jenna. No, Jenna said firmly, stepping to his side. We do this together. The hunter's cold gray eyes flicked between them, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Touching. But I didn't come here for teamwork. Let us see what the keeper can do. Before Jenna could respond, the hunter fired. The silver bolt whizzed through the air, its trajectory straight and deadly. Jenna reacted on instinct, raising her hand. The crescent mark flared brighter, and a shield of silvery energy materialized in front of her. The bolt struck the barrier and disintegrated into a shower of sparks. The hunter raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. Interesting. Max wasted no time. With a feral roar, he lunged at the hunter, his claws extended. The hunter sidestepped with unnerving ease, pivoting and swinging a silver-tipped dagger toward Max. Jenna's heart lurched as the blade narrowly missed Max's side. She focused her energy, the crescent mark responding to her will. A pulse of light shot from her palm, slamming into the hunter and sending him skidding back across the floor. The hunter recovered quickly, his movements fluid and precise. He didn't speak this time, his expression cold as he advanced on Jenna. Victor, Kira, Max shouted, his voice echoing through the warehouse. The rival pack leaders sprang into action, flanking the hunter from opposite sides. Victor lunged with his claws bared, while Kira moved with lightning speed, aiming for the hunter's blind spot. But the hunter was ready. He spun with inhuman speed, delivering a brutal kick that sent Victor sprawling. Kira managed to land a blow, her claws raking across the hunter's arm, but his retaliatory strike knocked her off balance. Jenna clenched her fists, the crescent mark burning hotter. She could feel the power coursing through her, begging to be unleashed. "You're stronger than you look," the hunter said, turning his attention back to her. "But strength without control is useless." Jenna met his gaze, her fear replaced by determination. "Then let me show you what control looks like." She raised her hand, focusing on the crescent mark. The energy within her surged, and the silvery light expanded, forming a wave that rippled across the room. The hunter braced himself, but the force of the wave knocked him off his feet, his crossbow clattering to the ground. Max seized the opportunity, closing the distance in a heartbeat. He tackled the hunter, pinning him to the ground. "Jenna now," Max shouted. Jenna hesitated, the silver dagger trembling in her hand. The hunter's cold eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she saw something behind his ruthless exterior, calculated intent, yes, but also something more human. "I want to stop," the hunter growled, his voice low and steady. "You can kill me now, but another will take my place. Lucas isn't your real enemy." Jenna's grip tightened on the dagger. "Then who is?" The hunter's lips curved into a faint, bloodied smile. "You'll see soon enough." Before she could respond, a deafening howl echoed through the warehouse. The sound was primal, filled with fury and grief. "Lucas," Max said, his voice grim. The hunter used the momentary distraction to shove Max off him, rolling to his feet with surprising agility. He snatched his crossbow and retreated into the shadows, his voice ringing out as he disappeared. "This isn't over, Keeper." The silence that followed was deafening. Jenna stood frozen, her body trembling with adrenaline. Max moved to her side, his silver eyes scanning her face. "Are you okay?" Jenna nodded, though her mind was racing. The hunter's parting words echoed in her ears, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Lucas is on his way," Victor said, his voice cutting through the tension. He limped toward them, his expression dark. "We need to get out of here." Jenna glanced at the door, her instincts screaming at her to run. But another part of her, the keeper in her, refused to leave without a plan. "No," she said firmly. "We hold our ground. If Lucas is coming, we face him here." Kira frowned. "Are you sure about that? We outnumbered and the hunter will regroup." Jenna took a deep breath, the crescent mark pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "I am sure. This ends tonight." They didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, the warehouse door burst open and Lucas strode inside, flanked by a dozen rogues. His golden eyes gleamed with triumph and his lips curled into a savage grin. "Keeper," he said, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "I see you've been busy." Jenna stepped forward, her hand glowing with the light of the crescent mark. "It's over, Lucas. Leave or face the consequences." Lucas chuckled, his laugh low and menacing. "You think your little light show scares me? You've barely scratched the surface of your power." Max growled, his claws extending. "You'll regret coming here." Lucas's grin widened. "Let us find out." The rogues surged forward, their snarls filling the air. Jenna raised her hand, summoning a barrier of light that held them at bay. Max, Victor, and Kira moved to intercept, their movements a blur of claws and teeth. Jenna focused her energy, the crescent mark blazing brighter. She could feel the seal's power flowing through her, a connection that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Lucas broke through the chaos, his golden eyes locked on hers. "You're stronger than I expected," he said, circling her like a predator. "But strength means nothing without control." Jenna met his gaze, her voice steady. "I have more control than you think." With a surge of determination, she unleashed a wave of silvery light. It exploded outward, knocking Lucas off his feet and scattering the rogues. The warehouse shook with the force of the energy, the crescent mark burning hotter than ever. Jenna stood tall, her power radiating around her. Lucas staggered to his feet, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and fear. "This isn't over," he snarled, retreating into the shadows. As the rogues fled, the light in the warehouse began to fade. Jenna dropped to her knees, her body trembling from the effort. Max was beside her in an instant, his hands steadying her. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Jenna looked up at him, her breath shaky. For now. But deep down, she knew Lucas's parting words were a promise. The war was far from over. Chapter 19, the final bite, the aftermath of the battle, left the warehouse eerily silent. The faint glow of the crescent mark on Jenna's palm dimmed as the last traces of the rogue pack's presence faded into the night. Max stayed close, his silver eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Victor and Kira stood nearby, battered but alive, their wary gazes fixed on Jenna. "We need to move," Max said, his voice low but urgent. "Lucas will regroup, and the hunter won't stay gone for long." Jenna nodded, pushing herself to her feet. Her legs trembled beneath her, the strain of channeling the seal's power taking its toll. Max caught her arm, steadying her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. "I will be," Jenna said, though her body ached with exhaustion. Kira glanced at the warehouse door, her expression grim. "She's right. We can stay here. If Lucas comes back, we'll be sitting ducks." Jenna tightened her grip on the silver dagger at her side. "Then let us finish this." Victor raised an eyebrow. "You serious? After everything we just went through, you want to go after him now?" "Yes," Jenna said firmly. Her voice carried a steadiness that surprised even her. "Lucas is the reason all of this started. As long as he's out there, the seal and everyone tied to it will never be safe." Max studied her, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "She's right. We've come this far. If we take him down tonight, it ends here." Kira and Victor exchanged a glance before nodding. "All right," Victor said, his tone resigned. "But we need a plan." The group returned to the bakery under the cover of darkness, moving quickly and quietly. Inside, Jenna grabbed her grandmother's journal and flipped to the page marked with the crescent moon symbol. "The seal can repel Lucas, but it won't destroy him," she said, her eyes scanning the page. "We need something more permanent." Kira leaned over her shoulder. The journal mentioned a ritual, something about binding a threat permanently to the seal. Jenna nodded. "It's risky, but it could work. The seal draws its strength from me now, and with the mark I can channel its full power. If I bind Lucas to the seal, he won't be able to harm anyone again." Max's expression darkened. "What happens to you if you do this?" Jenna hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on her. She had read the warnings in the journal, the toll the ritual could take on a keeper. "I don't know," she admitted. "But it's a risk I have to take." "No," Max said firmly, his claws extending. "We'll find another way." "There isn't another way," Jenna said, her voice rising. "Lucas won't stop until he has the seal, and the longer we wait, the more people will suffer. This is the only chance we have to end it." Max stared at her, his jaw tight with frustration. Finally, he exhaled sharply, his shoulders sagging. "Then I am staying by your side." "Me too," Kira said, her tone resolute. Victor sighed. "Looks like we all in." Jenna felt a surge of gratitude, their loyalty strengthening her resolve. "Let us end this," she said. The final confrontation took place in Harper Woods, the heart of Lucas's territory. The crescent moon hung high in the sky, casting its silvery light over the forest. Lucas was waiting for them in a clearing, flanked by a dozen rogues. His golden eyes gleamed with triumph, and a cruel smile played on his lips. "You've come to die, Keeper," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Jenna stepped forward, her crescent mark blazing with light. "No, Lucas. I've come to end this." Lucas's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can stop me? You're just a human playing with powers you don't understand." Jenna raised her hand, the light from the mark illuminating the clearing. "Maybe, but I've got something you'll never have." "And what's that?" Lucas sneered. "People willing to fight for what's right," Jenna said. Max, Victor, and Kira moved to her side, their presence a united front. Lucas's smile twisted into a snarl. "So be it." He lunged, his rogues following close behind. The battle was chaos. Max and Victor fought side by side, their movements a blur of claws and teeth. Kira moved with deadly precision, her strikes quick and decisive. Jenna stood at the center of the clearing, her focus entirely on Lucas. The crescent mark burned hotter as she summoned its power, the Seal's energy surging through her. Lucas circled her, his movements predatory. "You can win, Keeper," he growled. "Your power won't last forever. Neither will yours," Jenna shot back. She raised her hand, a wave of silvery light exploding outward. Lucas staggered but recovered quickly, his golden eyes blazing with fury. He lunged at her, but she met him head-on, the dagger in her hand flashing as it caught the moonlight. The blade found its mark, slicing through his side. Lucas howled in pain, his body convulsing as the energy of the crescent mark surged into him. "This is for everyone you've hurt," Jenna said, her voice steady despite the strain. She raised the dagger high, the light of the seal converging on her. The clearing blazed with brilliance as the binding ritual took hold, the energy wrapping around Lucas like chains. "No," Lucas roared, his voice echoing through the forest. The light intensified, and Jenna felt the Seal's power pulling at her, demanding more. She gritted her teeth, pouring everything she had into the ritual. Lucas's form dissolved into the light, his howl fading as the energy bound him to the seal. The clearing fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. Jenna collapsed to her knees, her visions swimming. Max was there in an instant, his arms steadying her. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "It's over," Jenna whispered, her body trembling with exhaustion. Max held her close, his silver eyes filled with both pride and relief. The crescent mark on her palm dimmed, but didn't disappear. The seal was stronger than ever, its power now tied irrevocably to Jenna. For the first time in weeks, the forest was quiet. And for the first time in her life, Jenna felt truly at peace. Chapter 20, A New Dawn. The quiet in Harper Woods was unlike anything Jenna had ever experienced. The oppressive weight that had hung over the town for weeks was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost sacred. The crescent moon hung low in the sky, its light softening as dawn approached. Jenna sat on the forest floor, her back resting against Max. His presence was steady, grounding her as the exhaustion of the ritual took hold. The crescent mark on her palm glowed faintly, a gentle pulse that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Are you okay?" Max asked, his voice quiet. Jenna nodded, though her body ached with the strain of channeling the Seal's power. "I think so. It's quieter now." Max tilted his head, his silver eyes studying her. "Quieter," the mark, Jenna said, holding up her hand. "Before, it felt like it was pulling at me. Now it's just there, a part of me." Max smiled faintly. "That's because you've fully bonded with the seal. It's yours now completely." The weight of his words settled over her, not as a burden but as a quiet reassurance. She had done it. The seal was safe, and Lucas was no longer a threat. The walk back to the bakery was slow, the group moving in a weary but victorious silence. Victor and Kira flanked them, their presence a reminder of the alliance that had carried them through the battle. "We'll head out in the morning," Victor said as they approached the edge of town. There's still a lot to clean up after Lucas's mess, but for what it's worth. "You've got our respect, Keeper." Jenna turned to him, her exhaustion momentarily lifted by the sincerity in his tone. "Thank you for everything." Kira offered a small smile. "If you ever need us, you know where to find us." With that, the two wolves disappeared into the woods, leaving Jenna and Max standing outside the bakery as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon. Jenna turned to Max, her voice soft. "Do you think it's really over?" Max hesitated, then nodded. "Lucas is gone. The seal is stronger than it's ever been. For now, at least, you can rest." The word felt foreign to her after everything they'd been through, but Jenna let herself believe it, even if just for a moment. Inside the bakery, the familiar scent of flour and sugar greeted them like an old friend. The chaos of the past weeks felt distant here, the space a haven of warmth and light. Jenna moved to the counter, running her fingers over its surface. "I wasn't sure I'd see this place again," she admitted. Max leaned against the doorway, his silver eyes soft. "You're tougher than you think, Jenna. You proved that tonight." She looked at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I didn't do it alone." Max's expression shifted, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. "Neither did I." The air between them felt charged, but this time it wasn't with tension or fear. It was something softer, something that had grown in the quiet moments between battles. Jenna stepped closer, her heart pounding for reasons entirely different from the ones she felt in the forest. Max, before she could finish, he closed the distance between them, his hand brushing her cheek. His lips met hers in a kiss that was both tender and electric, a promise forged in the heat of everything they faced together. When they pulled apart, Jenna's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "About time," she teased, her voice light. Max chuckled, his eyes shining. "Guess I needed a near apocalypse to make my move." They laughed together, the sound filling the bakery with a joy Jenna hadn't felt in weeks. In the days that followed, the town slowly returned to normal. Customers trickled back into the bakery, their chatter filled with curiosity about the strange events that had gripped the area. Jenna kept her answers vague, knowing the truth would sound unbelievable. Marie returned to work, her cheerful presence a welcome distraction from the weight of Jenna's new responsibilities. "You look different," Marie said one afternoon, studying Jenna with a curious smile. "Lighter, somehow." Jenna smiled, her fingers brushing the crescent mark hidden beneath her gloves. "Just got a lot off my plate, I guess." On the next full moon, Jenna stood outside the bakery, watching the silver light dance across the town. The crescent mark glowed faintly on her palm, a quiet reminder of the power she carried and the legacy she had embraced. Max joined her, his presence warm and familiar. "Thinking about what's next?" he asked. Jenna nodded. "The seal's safe, but there's still so much I don't know. About the mark, about my family's connection to all of this." Max smiled. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Jenna looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper. "Together," she echoed. As the moon rose higher, casting its light over the town, Jenna felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in weeks. The battles they had fought had changed her, but they had also revealed her strength. The Crescent crust was more than a bakery now, it was a sanctuary, a symbol of the bonds she had forged and the power she had claimed. And as she stood beneath the moonlight with Max by her side, Jenna knew this was only the beginning of her story.